Call the meeting to order. Welcome everybody in our audience. I want to begin by, on behalf of Council, welcoming back Councillor Sikora from his, I guess he was on holidays or something because he wasn't here for a couple of meetings. I'm glad he's looking in absolutely great shape, and he seems to be in fine form, good spirits. Good to have you back, Lou. Good to have you back in good health. I also wanted to make a couple of opening comments related to an event that ended yesterday. The last council meeting, council celebrated the torch relay event that we had just finished as we opened the games, the Olympic Games, and Coquitlam had on February 11th celebrated the arrival of the torch here in Coquitlam, and we acknowledged and thanked all of the volunteers, all of the community members, all of the children's choir members, people from across this community, perhaps half the community that either lined the streets or showed up at Mackin Park that morning, February 11th and Thursday, to celebrate the torch. That torch really galvanized our community, really brought us together. And then the games started. And while they started slowly for Canada, they finished with a bang. Yesterday, following the game, I perhaps jokingly, but perhaps not, named Sidney Crosby and Roberto Luongo honorary citizens of Coquitlam. I don't know if I have the capacity to do that, Mr. Clerk, but I did it anyway.
It's not under existing legislation.
Okay. But I wanted to talk about the patriotism and the passion and the camaraderie and the fellowship that Canada saw, that as visitors from around the world came to this place, this British Columbia, where we're already made up of residents from around the world. Canada did extremely well, particularly on golds. Looking at the medal count, Canada may not own the podium, but we certainly own the top spot on the podium. But I did want to have Council perhaps take the opportunity this evening to thank the organizers, the staff, the communities, and most of all the volunteers, because the Olympic Games could not have done the things that it did without those blue jackets that lined our streets and that lined our events and lined our venues. I spoke to many of them as we wandered through the streets and found a whole bunch of people from Coquitlam that had taken a couple of weeks holidays or had otherwise spent some time volunteering for the Olympic Games. I want Council to have the opportunity to thank them, and I would hope that we have a motion from Council to thank all those communities, all those people that were involved, but particularly the volunteers that did so much for our Olympic Games. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor everybody else. Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by everybody else. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item this evening is a presentation. We've had a change of representatives. I'd like to invite Ms. Barb Henham and Ms. Diana Hebert to come forward to speak on behalf of Crossroads Hospice Society and their Hike for Hospice 2010.
Barb is in denial about the games being over.
We wear our colors well, don't we, Canadians? Woo-hoo!
Go Canada, go.
That was very well put, Mayor Stewart. Thank you for that, for all our volunteers. What makes Crossroads strong is its volunteers. As we always say, they are our biggest asset. So I appreciate the City of Coquitlam recognizing volunteers during the Olympics. There's going to be a PowerPoint just rolling through our brief little presentation here. I'd first of all like to just thank the City of Coquitlam once again. We are absolutely thrilled to see our Crossroads banners flying high, beautifying Guildford corridor as we speak. We didn't expect those banners to get up. Someone said maybe I shouldn't mention to you in case you decide to take them down now. I don't think that's going to happen, but you know, we really appreciate that is a grand show of public support for Crossroads Hospice Society, so we thank you very much. So let's move on to Take a Hike for Hospice. Many of you here take a hike for hospice, and we want to thank you for that. This is the 8th annual National Hike for Hospice, I believe. We have 2 sites, one in Port Moody, one in Port Coquitlam. I have a few stats here I'd like to share with you. Provincially, there's 15 sites. Crossroads came number 1 in fundraising. We raised $58,000 for Hike for Hospice last year. Nationally, there are 99 sites. raised $1,263,000. We came 1/7 in national hikes, so we're quite proud of that. What that shows to us is that we live in a very committed and caring community, people who care about end of life. So we thank our entire community for that. So we'll jump into this. Who are the hikers? They're everyone. There's people who come out. This is a pet-friendly event. People come out with their families. This, as you know, our Treasures of Christmas is our gala. Well, this is our family event. And Diana just wanted to speak a little bit here about a certain group of people who come out, and those are those who come out who have lost a loved one.
Yes, I am Diana Hebert, one of the directors of the Crossroads Hospice, and I attended the Hike for Hospice last year in Port Moody, and I was very, very taken by the amount of families that came out and hiked for their loved ones and in their memory. And they all had special colored t-shirts on with their loved ones' names on the back, and they came out and really enjoyed. And all of those people are contributing and pledging to Crossroads Hospice. Also, I talked to people that just came out to support Crossroads and just enjoyed the nice 5-kilometer hike. So we really enjoyed a good hike and all the support for Crossroads Hospice.
So why should you get involved? For the 80% of Canadians that say they want quality hospice palliative care at the end of their life, for the less than 15% that actually have access to it, because hospice care is currently underfunded and under-recognized. To ensure hospice support is available to all residents that we serve, to remember our family and friends that have passed away. So again, our hike is on Sunday, May 2nd. It starts at 9 o'clock for registration. The hike starts at 10. It's usually over around noon. There's lots of festivities. Bring your pets on a leash. Bosley's gets involved and has treats for the pets. I say bring your family. There's ones in strollers, and just come out and have a good time. We will be coming back and distributing our flyers when we get them completed. We're just in the infancy stage of getting this all together, and we ask all the counselors, families, and friends to come out and join us on that day. Now, did anyone have any questions about our hike for hospice? So you're all going to come and take a hike for hospice? Yes. Sunday, May 2nd. 9 o'clock? And, well, 9 o'clock is registration, and 10 o'clock the hike begins. It's all through our wonderful nature trails in the Tri-City area, and Port Moody Nature Trail and Trabalay Poco Trail just behind Hyde Creek Center. So again, we thank you very much and ask you again to take a hike for hospice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next item on the agenda, item 2, is a presentation. I'd like to invite Taylor Lee Peters to come forward regarding a chance to choose success, a community project overview.
Mayor Stewart, Council, on behalf of Evelyn Humphreys, who's just recovering from an operation, she wanted me to come and thank the Council and the City of Coquitlam for the support that they've given during this project, and tell you that it's been a real delight to be able to do a collaboration with you. And I'd like to introduce the next candidate for a future mayor of Coquitlam.
Yeah, she mentioned that to me.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Taylor Peters. I'm here representing A Chance to Choose. As you know, each intake in the program does a community project. My intake number 14, has chosen to help the environment. We named our project Bat and Bees in Our Local Trees. Our goal was to get 4 bat and 4 bee houses placed in a few local parks and gardens in the city of Coquitlam. We had a fundraising dinner and a bottle drive, which helped us raise $1,800, and that's the net. The dinner was held at the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. With this money, we were able to purchase 4 bat houses and 4 bee houses and still have $700 to donate to the Evergreen. It's a non-profit organization existing to inform children about the environment. Thanks to the interest and support of the City of Coquitlam, we were able to place the 4 bee houses in 2 local parks. Inspiration Garden, located at the corner of Guilford Way and Pipeline on Burquitlam, and Burquitlam Community Organic Society, located at 515 Ebert Way. We are presenting the 4 bat houses to Karis Selk of the Coquitlam Parks Department for installation at Lafarge Lake and Como Lake. We would like to thank the Coquitlam Council for their support. We would also like to invite the Mayor and Council to the Bat House installation and to our graduation on March 19th. We hope this project demonstrates to the community that the youth do in fact care about the environment. Thank you for listening to my speech. I hope at some point you go visit the bat and bee houses. Have a good evening.
Any questions?
Oh yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I want to congratulate you. I'm always impressed. I used to be a fundraiser in my other life, and so the fact that you guys raised $1,800 with a bottle drive and a dinner is outstanding. I know how hard that can be, and my hat's off to you guys, because that's a chunk of change. Well done. I actually have a question for staff. I don't know if I will be able to get an answer. It has to do with bees and bee houses, and I'm curious, sort of an aside, it's sort of related. Do we allow beehives in residential? I mean, the places where these are not.
Did I help clarify that?
Yes.
I'm not for the council, but the bee houses in question are mason bees.
I was guessing that.
Yeah, they don't sting.
Yes,
They
they're
don't
not
collect
stinging.
honey, so they're not any kind of a.
They're just going to pollinate our flowers.
Great. So they're the ones that drill the little holes, and you just have little holes for them.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask.
No honey.
No honey.
No.
But I still have a question. Thank you.
Outstanding. Well, I want to acknowledge certainly a chance to choose. They came to City Council chambers and got a briefing on various civic and political realities, but also I want to thank Karis Selk and the staff that worked with you, because I know they put in a lot of effort to make sure that your project was successful to the extent that we were able to help, and I want to acknowledge our staff for having done that. Outstanding. Thank you. Oops, I've got, sorry, Councillor Lynch.
A whole bunch of people here. Actually, I wanted to, you had a prop there, and I'm not really familiar with it. So is that a bat house or a bee house or a combination of two? Or?
This is a bat house.
Okay, that would have been my guess.
My belief is that it houses about 150 bats. Really? So it's pretty close, 150.
So now, one of those sites that was stated was Inspiration Garden. So whereabouts in the Inspiration Gardens would that one be located?
The bat houses are not going to go, as far as I know, into Inspiration Garden. The bee houses have already been put up there.
Okay.
The bat houses we're going to be giving to Karis, and she's going to basically be working with the municipality of Coquitlam to establish where exactly is the best places for the bat houses and when they'll be installed. So once we get that information back from Karis, then we're going to be able to be involved in the installation at that point.
So that's what a bat house looks like, and the bee houses look like?
Bee houses are much smaller. They're probably a quarter this size.
Are they black?
No. We were instructed to actually paint the bat houses black. Apparently in the northwest area here, you need to have them black in order to maximize the amount of heat that they will actually receive from the sun.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you can tell me, is your graduation at 10 a.m. on March 19th? That's when it's been in the past, I think.
Yeah, between 10 and 10:30. Usually people come at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
And we get started.
Thank you so much.
So the microphone didn't pick that up. You're arriving starting at 10, and the ceremony starts at 10:30 on March the 19th. Look forward to it. Actually, one of the things that I discovered or heard during this process was that Coquitlam has a bee expert in among our residents, a world-renowned bee expert, and that she was able to guide some of the processes related to the mason bees. Thank you. Good stuff. Didn't know that. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Item 3 concerns the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, February 15th. Recommendations to approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Rasmussen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Item 4 concerns the minute of the Land Use and Economic Development Standing Committee meeting of Monday, February 22nd. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you. I'll have to excuse myself. There's a perceived potential conflict on this next item. Thank you.
Due to the proximity of your home. Councillor Asmussen excuses himself. Mr. Clerk.
The item of business is 4.2, which concerns an authorization for the issuance of development permit for an 85-unit townhouse development at 1305 Soball Street. The recommendation is that council approve the signing and sealing of this development permit and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute it on behalf of the city.
Moved by Councillor Reamer.
I'll second for discussion.
Second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. When this came to land use, we had some, I think, really good discussion about the parking, some of the challenges. I think there were some real creative uses of parking opportunities in terms of using whatever was possible. And they also have a co-op. I have a couple of questions, a co-op car. I have a couple of questions. I'm wanting to know, because we're just starting on this co-op car idea, if we have a plan to follow up to see as these things actually come into use, if we can get some information about how well they're being used, is it reducing the number of cars? I just want to sort of make sure that we're on top of that it's not just an exercise and great idea, but that we follow up with some data that it's well used. So that's just one thought I've had. The other has to do with, we had some concern about this write-in, write-out only, and we received some information that from Transportation Services that they will waive the write-in, write-out only. But the initial reason for the write-in, write-out only was because of the slope and the potential for excessive speed and the risks. And so now I'm just wondering if it's now no longer safe. So I'm just looking for the balance here, that if Transportation Services is concerned that the slope is too much, should we be looking at traffic calming, for example, so that we can make sure that people are coming down this street safely as they go left into Soball? So I just want to hear sort of some of the thinking about removing the right in, right out and the safety off of Soball.
I'll go with Mr. Suzak, I think.
I will do my best without knowing the site specifics. The Transportation Services would tend to make recommendations based on maximizing safety opportunities. I don't think it's a case of the site or the situation being unsafe. Our Transportation Services people have reviewed a request to open up the site, if you will, and they have come back satisfied that yes, on balance, they can live with that recommendation. But just to reiterate, they generally do want to err probably on a more conservative safety side, but they have taken a second look and they do agree that it can be opened up without creating undue safety hazards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Again, on land use, I won't go over, but Councillor Robinson explained our discomfort with this. Mine is still the parking, and I want you to pay very close attention to this because we're going to have to start using some of these as the measurables that we decide if we're going to go ahead and let less parking than we call for come forward, because I am still uncomfortable with that. What is the grade on Soball Street in front of this development?
Mr. Suzak.
I don't have that information top of mind, Your Worship.
Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Don't know the precise grade. It's getting up there. I think it's in the 6 or 7% range. I do know a representative for the applicant is here tonight, and he might have a more precise number than that if council wishes to ask that question to them.
Sure. I do. And the reason I do is because last week at this time, or at 1 o'clock, it was just right in, right out. And all three of us on land use are sort of wondering, in a week it changes, and what changed so quickly?
Good day, sir. Your name and address for the
Good
record.
evening. Hugh Carr. I'm Vice President Development at Polygon Homes. Thanks for the opportunity to answer that question. To be honest, I don't know what the slope is on Soball Street, but I do know the slope across the site is approximately 13%. Now, whether the street actually follows that grade or the curve of the street mitigates that grade, but that is the crossfall across the slope from the top.
The top of David down to Burton?
Down to the new right-of-way that comes in mid-site between SC12 to the north and SC15 to the south.
So that's about Marmont Street, I believe, is 13%.
Mr. McIntyre, I'm going to make the assumption that we don't have a street that we're proposing at 13%, but go ahead.
My apologies, Your Worship. Don't know the precise amount. We will get that information and get it back to Council. There would be a couple of grades, I guess, to take into account. There would be the total grade from top of site to bottom of site. Along a road, typically, you flatten out near the intersection so it's safer there and gets steeper. So it would be kind of a variable grade as you're coming down there. But the road wouldn't be in the 13% range of the site itself. That's getting excessive. So that would be a steeper road than we would encounter in most places in Coquitlam.
So the reason for the right in, right out in the first place wasn't because of the grade then?
It would be a combination of factors. The grade is a concern. It's a street with higher traffic volumes, being a local collector. And what you try to do is minimize the number of intersections on or driveways onto that sort of street. But my understanding is that transportation services have gone back and revisited it, and they feel that it is an acceptable approach. I know that the applicants, this was raised very early on as a concern around the proposal. Their traffic engineering consultant looked at it and came back with their assessment, and perhaps Mr. Carr can speak to that. They didn't feel it was a failure of the development or a major concern.
If I could, this is a good lesson for us, but next time when something comes before us, if transportation doesn't approve it or just wants right in, right out, maybe they could give us their reasons so that when we change our mind in a week, we know that these reasons have been solved or changed, or what the reason for changing your mind is. And maybe Mr. Carr can.
Well, I was just going to say, just further to what Mr. McIntyre said, our civil engineer in the initial designs had not felt the need for a right in, right out. So we had not initially designed the access roads with that component, and
okay.
it was added on later. So,
okay.
But it was not seen as required by our consultant initial design.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor McTinnell.
Thank you. Well, I like the projects that this applicant does around Coquitlam. They've done some very good ones. And I like some of the aspects in this, the fact that it's instead of just a single garage, it's too deep. Those are all very good. But I don't like the precedent we're setting up on our mountain. They're asking for a 10% reduction in parking. I think that doesn't bode well for our residents up there for a very long time, because public transportation up there is very poor at best. And so if we go along this path of limiting the amount of parking regulations up there that these residential developments are going to have, it's going to be a free-for-all, and it's just going to clog up those streets. It's going to be a nightmare up there. I think that this is just we're only just starting on this mountain, and we've already seen so many variances come to us being requested for this and that. I think that this isn't how we envisioned that mountain. I don't think it's how we envisioned how it was going to play out, and I won't be able to support this with a 10% reduction in parking up there. Again, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think that if we allow this, then more and more developments are going to be asking for these reductions.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Well, my thoughts are somewhat similar. I remember when we had another proposal last year, and I was speaking in opposition to it at that time. And again, it comes down to the reduced in parking, and we're doing this in order to facilitate a car share. And I didn't agree with it at that time, and I still have hesitation. I've yet to be seen any statistics to say that that's what's going to work, especially in our community. I know we have to be kind of innovative and hope that we're going to lead people to be more resourceful in how they're getting around, but I don't see us as a city being able to provide those transportation options, and that's my concern, that we're going down a route with things that have not been proven to be successful in our community, and we constantly see the traffic getting worse. And I'm wondering, even with the type of parking that we're suggesting here, where we have one parking spot in front of another, that does add extra parking, but it's not convenient parking. I know we discussed this before, where is that really reasonable to consider that people are going to be moving vehicles in and out? Even if you have 3 in a row, you're still going to have to move vehicles. So you add that on top of the fact that when you want to have people who are visiting to have reduced parking, I think is asking quite a lot of people to be able to accommodate in the short period of time that we have to improve our transportation, and certainly up on the northeast.
Thank you. I've actually had a short chat with Mr. Carr, and I think I'd like to have him come forward if he could and address the parking side of things. And I'm not sure we'll be able to make this decision tonight, given the number of questions, but I'm going to have you address the parking.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I use this? Sure.
Set it up if you want to.
Sure. Just read on that. Sure.
Okay, we're going to put a document on
if I could sort of see that section right in there, that'd be great.
We'll put a document on the overhead projector.
Okay, I hope everybody can see that. During the development permit process, the transportation group asked for our rationale for why we were asking for the parking variance. And I just did some quick number crunching. And I just looked in terms of the number of parking opportunities on the site. Now, I appreciate that the bylaw doesn't acknowledge tandem parking as being 2 parking spaces, and there may be concerns with internal tandem spaces, say the internal space maybe being taken up for other uses, storage or what have you. So the first sort of the columns of actual parking provided in city calculations, so tandem parking stalls, we're providing 150 parking stalls, the city acknowledges 75, side by side in garage 19, and we can go back down the list. The total number of parking stalls technically provided is 255, and the city calculation is 131. Now, the bottom calculation, I looked at, okay, let's say people did in fact use the inside portion of their garage for something else other than parking. And so we look at what I call still parking opportunities, parking that are dedicated to homes. Now that might be 1 internal and 1 on an apron. And we've designed this site to have as many aprons as possible. And as Councillor Robinson points out, in some cases we have parking spaces in between on sort of interstitial spaces. So parking dedicated to homes, 141, parking on aprons are 20, and visitor parking and co-op parking stall adds up to 178 when the bylaw requirement is 145. So, you know, my contention is that the number of parking opportunities there are on the site is very high. So I just wanted to get that out there so you're aware of how we've laid out the site in order to maximize parking. So I hope that makes sense.
No, I think that's helpful. Councillor Reid.
Well, this came up at land use too, and thank you for being here. We have in this council chamber approved other tandem parking spaces. The difference in being in this place, and this is why I'm sort of just not being too concerned about it, is that there's going to be aprons or parking spaces outside as well in a lot of the units. So we're going to be okay and we're going to catch up. Where you have the problem is when you get into these multifamily developments that you go into and there are no parking stalls outside whatsoever. You could probably get one of those little smart cars in there if you were really lucky. And then you have a tandem garage. So they have sort of gone over and above the parking requirements for us. So that's why we're sort of leaving this to go forward, because we do have enough parking. And no, tandem parking certainly wouldn't be my choice, but that's what happens when you get into the multifamily of today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't really have an issue on the parking myself. I think that the numbers do show that there's going to be places to park on site. We do have to be careful as a council that we, when we do relax the parking requirements, I recognize the environmental perspective that we should be looking at encouraging folks to get out of their cars, but we shouldn't be encouraging them to get out of their cars because there's no place to park necessarily, because that will only invite more problems. And this site, I don't see that as being the issue. So. Any other comments? The motion on the floor is approval of staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor McDonnell is opposed. The motion carries. I'll invite Councillor Asmunsen back in.
The next item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns fourth and final reading and a development permit authorization report for an 18-unit townhouse development at 562 to 568 Rochester Avenue. The recommendations are that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 3940, and that Council approve the signing and sealing of the related development permit for 562 and 568 Rochester Avenue.
Moved by Councillor Asmunsen, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 4.4 is a zoning bylaw text amendment to revise off-street parking loading requirements for multifamily residential developments. It's bylaw number 4102. Recommendations that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4102, and that this bylaw and its related application be referred to public hearing.
Second for discussion.
Moved by Councillor Sikora, second by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. We had this discussion at Land Use Committee, and I'd asked for we like pictures there. I'd asked for a picture of a loading space, but I didn't mean a street with a sign that says loading space. I meant a loading space that's actually on a property, and I even gave some addresses out, but I got the street. The picture's nice, but it wasn't what I wanted. I have difficulty with this. I think that if someone is developing an apartment or multifamily residential development, that they need to have on-site a loading space. I do not think that the loading space should be on public streets and roadways. They gave us a few examples, New Westminster being one and Burnaby being one. Well, I can tell you, as someone who's in that marketplace, when you go out there, some of the apartment buildings there have lots of parking underneath, so you're not having extra people parking all over the streets because there's loads of parking underneath. So when they allow loading zones in front of some of the really old apartment blocks, you don't have the traffic that we do. I can give you some examples. If you would go along Whiting Way at any time, you will see it packed with cars on both sides of the street. If you go along Westview, you will see cars parked on both sides of the street. If we were to take 4 or 5 cars out of that and make it a loading zone with no parking, we're just moving our parking problems out and onto other places in the city. It just makes no sense whatsoever. When you look at some of the older apartments in our city, you will find that you can drive onto the site and there is a loading zone. And it's not unusual to have more than one person move in or out of an apartment on the same weekend or the same day. If you were to have a moving van in front of an apartment on a street, because these are not going to be arterial or collectors, so they're going to be the narrowest streets we have, and you have a furniture delivery truck drive up at the same time, you're going to have fun having that street be passable at all. I think if you are going to develop in our city and you are going to develop multifamily housing, I believe you owe it to the residents and to your neighbors to have appropriate loading zones on site. And I will not be supporting this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Well, Councillor Reid went through most of the arguments that I have. When you have a couple of multifamily units, developments right next to each other, and you have all the parking that you have out there, and then you couple all that in with not just people moving in and out, but then you've got furniture deliveries, you've got water deliveries. I live on a pretty average street in Coquitlam, and every day on our street, in our small little street, there's delivery trucks coming down and parking, and you put that in a busy place, I think that we would be doing our residents a real disservice not to require these developments or these apartments to have off-street loading. I think we're inviting a huge traffic mess by not planning for the future. So I can't be supporting this either.
Thank you. And seeing no other speakers, the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor McDonnell, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Reamer, Councillor Lynch, Councillor Reid, Councillor Asmussen are all opposed. The motion fails.
Next item on the agenda, item 4.5, concerns the public consultation process report in order to amend the sign bylaw to permit third-party signs. The recommendation is that Council endorse the public consultation plan for proposed amendment to the sign bylaw in order to permit third-party signs in certain designated areas.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is the minutes of the Engineering, Utilities and Environment Standing Committee meeting of Monday, February 22nd. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
First item arising out of that meeting concerns mitigating the impacts of land development construction activities. The series of two recommendations is that Council endorse the procedures outlined in the report in order for reducing traffic impacts caused by on-road construction related to development, and secondly, that Council endorse the procedures outlined in the report for reducing clutter and dirt on the city's road right-of-ways and drainage systems related to development.
Moved by Councillor McDonnell, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5.4 is an update on infrastructure stimulus fund projects and other major capital projects. The recommendation of the committee was that Council direct staff to write a letter to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities regarding the deadlines associated with the infrastructure stimulus fund.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Just a quick question, wondering what the letter stipulates.
I'm going to ask Mr. Suzak to give his explanation of what he anticipates Council's response is, and we'll ask Councillor Asmussen if that, in fact, is the understanding of the motion.
All right, Your Worship. When the program was announced, the federal government's initial stance was that their grant funding could potentially be rolled back for projects that were not complete by March 31st. Since that time, 2011. Thank you. Since that time, the federal government has confirmed that they will advance funding for all works completed by March 31st, 2011. The concerns that we have, and I think other municipalities have, is that there could well be some work still in progress that might need the benefit of another construction season in order to be complete. For example, weather or any other factor that could be outside the control of a municipality could potentially cause a delay. And we were going to compose a letter for the mayor's signature asking the FCM to continue in its efforts to have a deadline extended by an extra construction season.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that's Councillor Rasmussen? We could activate Councillor Rasmussen. Sure. Good. You're up. Go ahead.
Okay. That is correct. What we're doing is the FCM has always been involved in this issue. They have made recommendation asking for it. What we are doing is just went to reaffirm that position that this deadline can cause some difficulties for cities in their construction projects and for the federal government to please look at extending that deadline. And that is going to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and on to Ottawa also for their consideration. That's what the letter was for.
I assume it's a respectful request. Obviously, we applied for this money under the conditions for which it was granted, and now we're asking for an extension, and that's fine.
The FCM's already done that. We're just reaffirming again what they've asked for.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that King Ed Street improvements, Coast Meridian, and Lougheed and Barnett all acknowledge that some of the changes will make it easier for cyclists. And I just wanted to know where there are traffic signals being added or changed. Can we just make sure that they're bike friendly and that we run it through our transportation services folks who are responsible for our cycling program? I just see an opportunity here, and I want to make sure that we have those eyes take a look at it so that when you're riding your bike, the signals are right there. You don't have to actually climb your bike up on the sidewalk to go over and hit a signal. That it's, if we have the opportunity to make these things happen, that we would do so.
Mr. Suzak.
Thank you, Worship. We will take that as instruction, and I will have our discussions with our traffic operations people.
Thank you.
Good. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I was just about to say that this is the timing for this letter to go through. The FCM, which I'm a member of the Board of Directors, has been in constant discussions with the federal government on this. One of the major arguments we're proposing right now is that a lot of the municipalities that are afraid that they won't get their funding if they don't have the project completed are now paying extra premiums to construction companies or whatever in order to complete it on the time schedule that has been set by the federal government. And we're asking, is that the best use of the tax dollars, or if they could just extend the deadline, then we could accomplish the same thing but with cheaper cost to the taxpayer. And I could say that on Wednesday, again, I'll be in meetings with the counterparts across the country for FCM, and I'll be raising this issue again, as I know is already on the agenda, and we'll be, again, discussing this with the federal government. And if there's any other arguments that can be put forward, if any of the other councillors want to get them to me, I will raise them again also at the meeting that starts on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing that bothers me is that $5.5 million for Coast Meridian Road. Is that the one where we put in where so many residents were supposed to respond and didn't? Is that part of that package or not?
Yeah, Your Worship, that particular project was the subject of the counter-petition process. It is not a part of the infrastructure stimulus funding package, but staff listed the major projects that would be underway for the year, and this is one of them.
So this will not affect the counter-petition that you've been advertising to the residents in Coquitlam?
Your Worship, the issue of the stimulus funding and our concerns about construction timelines are not a part of that particular project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. See no other comments? The motion is a letter. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is the minutes of the Recreation, Sports and Culture Standing Committee meeting of Monday, February 22nd. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Item 7 is the minutes of the Strategic Priorities, Administration and Protective Services Standing Committee meeting of Monday, February 22nd. The recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The first item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the Coquitlam Emergency Program Bylaw number 4092. Recommendations that Council give first, second, and third readings to this bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Lynch. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item, item 7.4, concerns an application for a permanent change to a liquor license for a food primary establishment, in this case the Golden Onion Restaurant at 3055 Anson Avenue. The recommendation is that Council not support the application by the restaurant for a permanent change to their food primary license to allow for patron participation entertainment and an extension of hours of liquor service past 12 a.m., and that the report of the City Clerk dated February 15th be forwarded to the Liquor Control and Licensing Branch to serve as Council's comments on the application. As
Second.
Moved by Councillor Lynch, seconded by Councillor Reamer to not approve. Councillor Reid.
I just want to be sure that all these comment sheets as well go to Victoria, do they?
We are considering the package to be a complete package, so yes.
Okay. And in some of these comment sheets and a couple of calls I've had on this, people are saying that they are running a karaoke there now, so hopefully could we get Bylaw to check up on that, please? I said I would bring it up, and I just have. Thank you.
Done. Thank you. Any other comments? The motion is to not approve Golden Onion's application for karaoke and extended hours, and to forward the comments to the provincial authorities. All in favor of the motion? Opposed? The motion carries.
Item 8 is the fourth and final reading of City of Coquitlam Coast Meridian Widening Loan Authorization Bylaw, Bylaw number 4094. Recommendations that the results of the alternative approval process for Bylaw 4094 be received, and that Council give consideration to fourth and final reading of Coast Meridian Widening Loan Authorization Bylaw number 4094.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Aspenson. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you. So, Mr. Zuzak, this is the one that a lot of residents are objecting to of the way we're going to go about this loaning this money.
Your Worship, this was the project that was subject to the counter-petition process.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a difficulty with that, Mayor, because I think that the residents have spoken and have mentioned the fact that they don't like the way we're going about it, and I think it's a terrible way of borrowing money without having the approval of majority of residents. So I cannot support it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, because there was some statements made in the media as well about this. The city isn't actually borrowing money here on the backs of the taxpayer. This is money that will be paid back from development cost charges when development proceeds. This is work that would be covered under the development cost charge process that allows that development pays for the works associated with development. When Coast Meridian overpass is completed, Coast Meridian will become a bottleneck unless we undertake work to make sure that it is an extension, essentially, of a new highway that Port Coquitlam is building over top of their railroad tracks. In order to advance that work, it was approved by Council that we would borrow the money in order to borrow the money on behalf of the Development Cost Charge Fund that be paid back from development cost charges. I would actually be totally opposed to the idea of this kind of counter-petition for borrowing on behalf of the taxpayers, but in this case we're borrowing to have work done that will ultimately be paid for out of the development industry and not by the taxpayers, and so I'm quite comfortable, and I know that Council has wrestled with that as well, and that's where we're at. Any other comments? Seeing none. The motion is to accept the counter-petition results. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. Motion carries.
Item 9 is the report of the City Clerk, Deputy City Clerk, and it relates to the appointment of Chief and Deputy Chief Election Officers. The recommendation is that Council receive the report of the Deputy City Clerk dated February 22nd, and 2, that Staff be directed to prepare revised reports for the March 15th regular council meeting recommending an appointment of a chief and deputy chief election officers, and as well as an alternative date for the April 24th town hall meeting.
Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. I'm a little disappointed. The fact is that, here we are, beginning of March, we still haven't got a returning officer appointed. And the fact is, by now we should have been able to fill the seat of a 9th or the 8th council member.
Councillor Sikora, we don't have a motion on the floor yet.
Okay.
I assumed you were going to make a motion. Someone want to make a motion? Okay, Councillor Reamer, I think sounds like she's going to make an amended motion. As soon as Councillor Reamer's microphone is turned on, she can make her motion.
Thank you. I'm fine with recommendation number 1 that we receive the report of the Deputy City Clerk dated February 22nd. It's motion 2 that I would like to amend. And I would like to amend to say that staff be directed to report back to council on these 2 items following the completion of discussions with the ministry. And I say this because since January we've been grappling with dates, and I think that's somewhat unfair to our citizens who keep looking ahead. We keep making dates ahead of this process. We've been engaged in discussions with the ministry, and I think that instead of setting future dates, that we ought to just set it for the completion of those discussions with the ministry concerning a possible exemption for the by-election. So that is my reasoning behind the amendment.
Okay, so the motion would be
that staff be directed to report back to council on these 2 items following the completion of discussions with the ministry.
Okay, and you move. Is there a seconder?
I'll second the discussion.
Seconded by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Reid.
Well, we started going down the slippery slope and hoping that the province would be Johnny on the spot quickly, but they weren't, and obviously because we had this beautiful big celebration that every Canadian enjoyed. I think, though, I would support it if I could put a date in it. And the dates, I don't know exactly which one to put in, because the whole thing of trying to get a special date is up to our clerk, and it becomes so complicated with every statutory holiday and a bird day and a bee day and whatever else he comes up with. So I don't know exactly what date, but I want it as soon as possible. So I don't know if Mr. Gilbert, Your Worship, has got a date in mind that we could possibly put in. I don't like leaving it open-ended for sure.
Mr. Gilbert.
Thank you, Your Worship. What we're asking is that we're able to report back, in this case, following the discussions, in order that we can set the appropriate date. The appointment of the chief election officer sets in motion a number of different timelines, and until we make that actual appointment, it's hard to choose the date of general voting day. And so that's been a small part of our need to report on a more often basis than we normally would.
I think it's important, Your Worship, that we try and save these dollars if we can. I mean, that's the idea, not only for our city, but we're going to be setting probably a precedent here within the province, and there's lots of other cities that are struggling just as much as we, and especially some of the smaller cities. So I'm going to be indulgent, but if we haven't heard anything by the next council meeting, I think we are going to be compelled to move forward.
Well, and on that point, since the discussions have largely been held with me, I know council has been filled in to some degree. I'll express what's been going on with the discussions. On Friday, February 19th, I had the scheduled meeting with the Deputy Minister Dale Wall and some of the legislative staff related to this. This was the staff end of things, related to whether or not it's possible to get to avoid a costly by-election. That conversation concluded with the possibility, because we had pointed out some points in legislation, they had pointed out some points, and together It was agreed that, well, we'll have to put the question to the minister. I then scheduled a call with the minister. This is Minister Bill Bennett, Minister of Community and Rural Development. And Minister Bennett and I spoke on February 25th for about 25 minutes. The conversation was essentially concluded with he would like to do this. He would like to find a way. If there is a way, he would commit to doing that. He would have a discussion with his staff. We had laid out our one option that we felt was viable, and he asked for that in writing. We drafted a letter that day, and the next day it was sent over my signature, laying out how this might unfold. Given that the minister was quite responsive to our request, it seems appropriate that we would now wait. That was on Friday, mind you, so this is one business day later. We don't have a response yet, but I'm not surprised that we don't have a response today. But I would expect one very quickly. He did commit to having one for us very quickly. This is a request that, as Councillor Reid said, lots of communities face this kinds of things, particularly in British Columbia, because our rules for by-elections are perhaps more onerous than many other provinces. As I spoke to other elected officials across the region and indeed across the province, every mayor and every council member with whom I spoke on this issue agrees that we need a more intelligent approach on the issue of council vacancies, because this, the example that many of them cite is if an elected member on an election night out of excitement dies of a heart attack, we have to have a by-election, because we cannot choose the next elected person, even though the person that died wasn't even sworn in at this point. I mean, those are the kinds of challenges in British Columbia's law. So given that there is a task group looking into these questions, and that those questions will be revisited over the next month, actually, it was felt prudent by the minister and prudent by us that we may want to at least wait until that process ends. So that's in the hands of the minister. I suspect we'd get an answer this week, quite frankly, and I'm almost certain that we'll have an answer before the next council meeting. Hope that helps. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. This is precisely what I'm getting at, Mayor, is the fact is that, you know what, by now, I don't know what the procrastination is in this council chambers, that we can't make up our mind. Election is election. The Act is very clear, the Charter is very clear. And the fact is to somehow wait for some other sun to come up and set many times, we might make up our minds, and I don't know what we're searching for. Very, very simple. The people in this world, especially in Canada, paid a big price to fight democracy that we have today, and the freedom that we have today, the right to vote, the right to express ourselves. I don't know what is it that we're trying to hide in here. The fact is, I know there's many, many figures being bandied around in here. $250,000, well, that's a crock. It is the most fictitious figures I've ever seen in my life. And then the other day I pick up the paper and I find out that it could be $185,000, $200,000. That's a crock also.
Councillor
Because
Sikora,
number one, outside of the...
Councillor Sikora, those numbers come from staff, and they can't defend themselves. I'd rather that we stick to facts here, if you'd like. Please.
Yeah, well, I am stating facts. The fact is that, outside of the hall rentals or the rentals for the schools, the only expenses that we have is the staff we're going to hire for electioneering. Well, the fact is, for the polling station, the fact is that, you're going to have a 5 or 10% turnout. You staff for that. You don't staff for like a number one election, a full-blown election. That's where you blow the $250,000 or $200,000. You could maybe spend maybe $75,000. If the figures were put together. I don't know, I'm just taking a wild guess on this, but I'll tell you something. For us to somehow delay this election is frightening to me. It's really frightening. It means only one thing, that this council cannot make a decision. And that is the most frightening thing in this world. The fact is that democracy cannot play out in these council chambers like anywhere else. We should be happy that there's either the federal government or provincial government wants one of our candidates, one of our council members. Wouldn't it be so funny if you had a council that nobody wanted? The federal government or the provincial government nobody wanted? Wouldn't that be something? Then you'd be here forever and a day and nobody wants you. So we should be delighted that somebody moves on and does better things for us, probably. But I'll tell you something, not to call election or wait for another report for something else is going to happen, I cannot support it. I'm sorry. It's time. It's time, Mayor, that you should take a handle on this and say election will be called. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to that leadership, Mayor.
You want me to? No, I won't go there. Councillor Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as I've expressed before, I have a problem with the idea that we talk about not being able to afford an election, that we can't afford democracy. When we first knew that we were going to be required to fulfill a council seat, that was about 5 months ago, and I expressed some concern at that time how long it was going to take us to get to an election date. And there was all sorts of justifications, and a lot of them made a lot of sense, whether or not we wanted to have one in the middle of winter, did we want to have it throughout Easter breaks, did we want to have it when the Olympics were on. And we decided to wait so that we could have it when we thought there was going to be a better turnout, when we thought that the candidates would have the proper time and ability to campaign, to get their messages out. I guess the problem I have, when we first talked about going to the provincial government, was because there was a task force and we were going to look at how we could address this situation in the future. I have a bit of a problem with the idea that we're now going to change the process, knowing that we now have a vacant seat. And I've been hearing stories and talk from different people. They're asking why it is that we are so afraid to have an election. Is it because we're concerned about the leading candidate? Is it because we feel that we're not important enough, that we simply can refuse to fulfill any vacancies, something that we certainly wouldn't do with any senior management positions? I wonder if we pass this, what happens if then the provincial comeback says, okay, you do have a different option? Are we then bound to have that election, or could the council then take a vote to decide to use an alternative process? Because quite frankly, the provincial government, and we can make excuses for them, and that's what we have done, they haven't given us an answer, and this is a fairly important issue. Perhaps the provincial government should have a fund so that when there's a municipality that is required to have a by-election, they can withdraw money out of that fund so that they can have it. I don't think that the answer is to say, well, we simply can't afford it. If it was a mayor who'd gone on to be elected, would we then run with a new mayor every couple of months and just re-swear them in so we can fill that position? I don't think we would. I think this is an important position. I have a real hard time saying that we can't have an elected person to fulfill that spot, and I have just as equal a hard time saying that we are not going to follow the established process. We're somehow going to change how we're going to do things, because maybe, and we can use the financial argument, but I don't believe that everybody buys that. I think a lot of people say, why is it, other than cost, why is it that you don't want to have a simple by-election that we did when Councillor Reid came back on council, when former Councillor Wilson came on? There was a by-election when Councillor Sikora went on to become an MP. We didn't use that same argument then, and the costs were similar. And I think that we're not sending a very good message to our residents every time we say, and we know there's a poor turnout, and part of we have to take some responsibility for that. But to simply say, oh well, because there's been a poor turnout, that's a rationale to not spend money to have an election at all. So I would like to see us set a date that there's going to be an election, unless we're given some type of opportunity to maybe consider that. And I quite frankly, I'm not even sure I would be in favor of going to any of the other options we've talked about and heard about, because simply it's changing the rules in the middle of the game. I would certainly be in favor of the provincial government saying, you know what, that was a terrible situation, and in future, this is your options. But to say, no, you know what, we're going to change the options for you now, just makes it sound like we're trying to subvert the process, or somehow we have a vested interest on how it is we're going to select, and we're not actually the ones selecting, how the citizens of Coquitlam get to select who it is they want to have represented. And we know all too frequently we've had votes here that are 4-4. That one extra vote can be a very important decision maker in what the future of the city is, what the vision is, where those votes go. So for us to say that we could be basically having initiatives of the city failing because we're locked in a deadlock of 4 votes each, I think that there's a very, very consistent and strong message that whenever councils have been formed, there's an odd amount of people there, so that the vote should go one way or another. And we certainly don't want to see any of the situations we've had in even neighboring municipalities quite recently. So I just have a real hard time accepting all the arguments of why we shouldn't have an election. I think we need to fulfill that seat. It's been 5 months. There was a huge outcry for them to call a by-election for the MP seat that was vacated when Don Black stepped down, and we're just doing the same thing. I don't think it sits well with the public, and it doesn't sit well with me.
Thank you. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be in a similar vein. Democracy. We're putting a price on democracy. And we have a system in place that has for by-elections. Personally, I don't believe that local governments, provincial governments, or the Prime Minister should be playing with the date of an election or a by-election. We see that happening for political consideration. And whether there's political consideration or not in this, it opens that door for that to happen. I really believe that elections, whether the setting of the date and the by-election, should be run and through BC elections, not by local councils or local governments or up the chain. It should be away from the elected people because it allows political reasons to be played as to why you have an election. I believe we should have an election. I believe there is presently a task force set up by the province looking at election financing and some other election issues, but I think this issue should be on the table also for them to come back with. And my strong recommendation to them would be that BC elections should be in charge of setting the dates for by-elections. Our other elections are set in legislation for our election every 3 years, or from the provincial government now with the mandated every 4 years, which I think I give them credit for doing that. It takes away that political thing where we used to say, well, 4 years, 5 years, we'll look at the polls, we'll see where we're going. No, the Liberal government, I think, did the right thing in setting a firm date on the election and take that politics out of it. And I think by doing this, and we started, I think the letter went out on January the 11th requesting that we not have an election. We deferred this on February 15th to March 1st to see if we'd have an answer from the provincial government on this. We still don't have an answer. And I think we've run the course on this. I think we should have an election at this time. I don't like spending the money. I think by-elections, once again, should be through BC elections. It should be through a fund set up through BC elections. And that fund is drawn on for all communities that are forced into having by-elections, whether it's due to health or a person moving on to a different level of politics. And I think it would make it far cleaner system that way. And I think that's what we all want. Because, we did sacrifice a lot for our rights and freedoms of democracy. And to put a price on democracy, I think you look at everybody in this world, there never should be a price put on democracy. That's wrong. So I'm not going to be in favor of this. The one part I don't like in this was the suggested date for the election would have been May 22nd, which is a long weekend. We have to have a better date than that. And I know the clerk's office has some great difficulties with Easter, long weekend, and different things coming up. But I'm in support of having an election. Thank you.
Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I'm referring to minutes of our January 18th regular council meeting. I moved a motion and it was seconded. There were 4 recommendations. Recommendation number 3 was pending the outcome of the aforementioned review, the City of Coquitlam be granted an exemption to the requirement to hold a by-election at this time and thus be permitted to leave the current empty council seat vacant or allow it to be filled by an alternative means. And then recommendation number 4, a response to the City of Coquitlam's request for an exemption be received prior to the planned appointment of a chief election officer at the February 15th, 2010 regular council meeting. So really, all my amendment does here is honors those 2 recommendations that were made at our January 18th meeting. I don't have a problem with adding a date onto this. I know Councillor Reid had mentioned to that. But I think that the main point here is that we need to complete our discussions with the ministry prior to going ahead with the appointment of our election officers. So I have no problem if we want to say staff be directed to report back to council on these 2 items following the completion of discussions with the ministry and say by March 15th, if that's going to assist some of the rest of you in deciding this. But as I say, we have already passed recommendations number 3, 4 of January 18th meeting, and both of those recommendations indicate the desire by this council to go ahead with this current process that we're involved in, and those are discussions with the ministry concerning the by-election exemption. So we've already moved this, and I was just trying to clarify that in this recommendation that we're looking at today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell, if we could activate the second.
I agree with Councillor Reamer. Well, actually, I agree with a lot of you. We have waited too long for this, for a resolution. It's gone on way too long. However, we did decide that we were going to look at the options that were available to us. It shouldn't be any surprise that the provincial government has been slow in getting a response to us, but in fairness, there was a little party going on in Vancouver which took up people's times. But I would go along with Councillor Reamer and say that let's put a line in the sand, and if we don't hear back from them on our options by the next council meeting, then we will set an election date.
No, and I think that's a prudent thought. Actually, wasn't going to say this, but rising to the minister's defense a little bit, he just had an operation, and he apologized for the length of time. I know that he will provide us an answer by the next council meeting. I do want to reiterate that we've had 2 unanimous council recommendations, both of which were to move us forward to essentially to wait until the recommendations of the task group came in. So we were anticipating that we were going to ask the province, at the very least, to not have a by-election until the end of May. If this were a mayoral election, of course, that would be different. Because the rules would apply differently, and on the poor turnout, let's face it. The last time we had a by-election, it was a 4.9% turnout, which is hard to describe as really democratically influential. It's enormously expensive. I know that I don't want to put a price on democracy, but every piece of email I've received on this subject has said, please don't have a by-election. For $250,000, we could hire 3 firefighters or a part-time counselor. And I think that we have to be very careful with the citizens' money. Council position is an enormously important position. I accept that. But I also want us to make sure that as often as possible we look to the public, we try to spend the public's money as diligently as we would our own. So were you amending the motion, or were we leaving it as we sat? Okay, so we're going to take the motion as originally written. Is that okay? And that would have the deadline in it of next council meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Are the mover and seconder are comfortable with that? Councillor Lynch?
I wondered, I kind of paraphrased a question as I was speaking.
Okay, I didn't hear it. So.
And I was wondering what happened if we were to pass the recommendation subject to would the council still have the ability, we're talking about setting election, but would the council have the ability, if they decided, if they were given an alternative means from the provincial government, would they have the option then of using one of those alternative means to appoint or designate, or however we're going to describe that, prior to the date set of the election? Because basically all this does is set dates in. I'm not sure exactly what the city clerk's department has to do. I mean, I know a lot of things have to do, but we're talking about a week or something that we should know, right? From the provincial government, from the minister, we should have an answer on whether or not there's going to be any. Well,
quite frankly, I don't want it to go beyond next council meeting either. So, I mean, if we don't have an answer by then, we go ahead and have council. We have a by-election. It's not a great use of money, but that's okay. That's life. So, does that answer your question?
I guess it does answer my question. It's not the answer I was looking for. It's basically saying we're still delaying, I was hoping to make a decision tonight. Okay.
That was a point of clarification. Do you have a point of clarification, Councillor Sikora, or do we have to do a second round?
No, just,
Councillor Sikora, is there a point of clarification?
Not a question. The fact is that, I'd like to maybe ask a question is, What are we searching for with all these, referring back to the minister? What are we searching for? Are we searching for no election whatsoever? Are we searching for somebody that we can pick? What are we searching for is what I'd like to know. Let's get on with the show, okay?
That was discussed in the original motion when council unanimously suggested that we ask. We've gone ahead and asked. The minister has said, I will get back to you. Essentially, the two options before the minister today probably are find a way to use the 9th candidate, or else allow the seat to remain empty as it currently is allowed to remain empty if the vacancy occurs in the last year. In other words, extend that last year back an extra 8 months so that it aligns with our current reality. That's where we're sitting, and the minister has promised us a response. He's promised us a response immediately, and I suspect it will be tomorrow or Wednesday, and certainly by the end of this week. So, okay. A clarification, I trust?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm just wanting clarification on what we're voting on.
The motion before us is as written.
So you're talking about are you talking about recommendation number 2? 1 and 2.
1 and 2, that we receive the report and that we direct staff to prepare the revised reports for March 15th, recommending the appointment of a deputy chief and deputy chief election officer and a date for the by-election. That would, right now we don't have a staff report that would permit us to do that anyway, so this is the earliest we could do it in any case. So the motion before us is March 15th. We either have a response from the minister or we pick a by-election date. Very good. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. Councillor Asmussen is opposed too.
I'm sure I'm clear on it. This says it. Being clear to me, I wasn't sure. We make the decision on March.
We make the decision next council meeting. There will be a staff report with which we can make a decision at the next council meeting. And I trust there will be an answer as well. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item, item 10, concerns the Metro Vancouver Board in brief. The Metro Vancouver Board representative is available to respond to questions, but the staff recommendation is that Council receive the bulletin for information.
Second. Moved by Councillor Lynch, second by Councillor McDonnell. Councillor Robinson.
I have a question. On the Metro Vancouver Tap Water Campaign, Metro Vancouver Sustainability Framework has a goal of reducing bottled water by 20% by 2010. And I want to know what we're doing here in Coquitlam, in the city.
Well, I know I went to the Metro Vancouver Tap Water Campaign canister at the Olympics and filled up my water bottle twice. But I don't know what else we're doing here.
Are we looking at that as a city to reduce bottled water and encourage people to drink from the tap?
Go with our general manager of engineering.
Thanks, Your Worship. A couple of things. Top of mind is that we are joining the communications campaign. We are going to be advertising on our vehicles, the same advertisements that are showing up in Metro van vehicles, but on a broader scale. Council has established an environmental services division. We're in the process of hiring a manager, and issues of water use, sustainable water use, will be a part of the remit of that new division, and we expect to have programs rolling out as a consequence of that.
Great. We may also want to take a look at our new facilities and all the machines that are in there, and encourage people to use the fountains and the taps instead of buying bottled water, for example. So I'm looking forward to when we have somebody on board who can take a look at those things. Thank you. That's it.
That's one of the things we're blessed with in Lower Mainland is outstanding water. And unfortunately, as you went to the Olympic venues, you ended up searched for any water bottles you might have. If you brought water in a bottle, you had to empty it out and then go in and buy a bottle of water. We need to find a better way as a community to encourage people to use tap water, because it's outstanding. It's what I drink when I'm not drinking coffee. Anybody else on that? Motion to receive.
It's been previously moved and
Previously moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have two other business. We have another business item. My apologies. Item 11. There's a blue report which was circulated, and there are copies at the back. It regards the Public Works Division Cyclical Review. The recommendations that Council receive this report entitled Public Works Division Cyclical Review for information.
Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Reamer. Receipt. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And okay, we're on. I'm going to go to other business right now. Councillor Robinson has advised us of an item she wishes to raise.
To introduce a...
One moment, please. There you go.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce a notice of motion to reconsider bylaw number 4098, which is...
It wouldn't be a notice of motion. It would simply
a notice to reconsider.
A motion to reconsider.
Sorry, I was
No
reading
trouble?
too fast. To reconsider bylaw number 4098, that's the badminton request on Burbidge. The reason I wanted to bring this back is I've learned some more information having to do with parking. I've asked for some more information and found out that there's actually extra parking available that we didn't know about before, and I would like this council to reconsider this new information.
The motion has been moved by someone who has been on the prevailing side to reconsider a previously adopted resolution of council to reject something. This is a motion to reconsider. It's been seconded by Councillor Lynch. Councillor Robinson, did you have anything further on that? No?
Well, I could speak to that a little bit more.
No, it's up to you.
Okay, well, I will speak to it. I made some notes here. Might as well put them to use. So there are several concerns with this going in here, and I went through them again after voting and looked at, does it belong in an industrial zone? And it's like, well, we already have a hockey rink in there, we already have gymnastics in there, and we have no other zone in our city that allows for these high ceilings required for it. So that to me was not a great argument, and the only thing I was getting stuck on was the parking. So I asked staff for some additional information if they could find additional parking still on the site, and they were able to secure some additional parking. I've also actually gone down there, and I was there today at 11:30, and all of the shared parking that they have said would be available to them, there were two cars in.
Sorry, this is on the validity of the reconsideration.
Oh, it's reconsideration. Anyway, I changed my mind, and I'd like us to reconsider.
There you go. Don't you dare, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Reid. Oh, one moment. There you go. Okay. Not so much the issue, but if there's reason to reconsider, debating the reconsideration of it. I don't suppose we're going to have a challenge on the getting this motion passed, so I don't see any other motion, any other debate on the motion to reconsider. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora, Councillor McDonnell, Councillor Asmundson, and Councillor Reid are opposed to reconsideration. The motion fails. Okay. Councillor Asmundson has moved adjournment. Councillor Robinson seconds. All in favor of adjournment? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll go to question period for subjects on this evening's agenda, if there are any. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Ralph Banney. My address is 1386 Deer Ridge Lane in Coquitlam. And I'm here to ask Council a question relating to the by-election. If the precedence has been set throughout the course of time to call a by-election under the terms that by-elections have been called forever, to have a change, I wonder if Council has received, and my question is, I wonder if Council or staff have received a legal opinion on changing the general practice of bylaws from the past when a bylaw is due, instead of going and trying to make it retroactive, rather than going and making it forward. And I think Councillor Lynch made a perfect example. If the bylaw or the ministry decide to change it or make a recommendation, that should be going forward. It should not be for the existing position. So my question is to council and staff, do you have a legal precedence or a legal opinion? Thank you.
Okay. I don't believe we have, is any staff member going to help? I don't actually think we've dealt with that, only because we've been dealing with Legislative Council in Victoria, and Legislative Council in Victoria are the ones that ultimately are going to decide whether this is legal under the Act. The Act does permit the minister to may make any order the minister considers appropriate to achieve the purposes of the Act. And without limiting the subsection 1, the minister may make an order extending any time period or establishing a new date in place of a date set under the Act, and giving other directions the minister considers appropriate in relation to this. So it's language like that that anticipates that the minister may, under some circumstances, vary the specific requirements of the Act as permitted by the legislation. And I think Legislative Council are now reviewing that to find out whether or not that's something that they're going to recommend to the minister that he can do or can't do. Is that? I'll go to the clerk for correction if I'm wrong.
No, that was correct. I would simply point out that it's the Community Charter and the Local Government Act that guides parts of these considerations, not a local bylaw. So it's not a legal opinion that we would obtain. And we trust that the ministry is not acting ultra vires, that they are acting within their own powers of their own legislations.
Yeah, since they would be granting us permission to do this, they would have to seek the legal opinion and be comfortable that it is in fact in conformance with the appropriate legislation. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you all for coming.